The Korthax battlecruiser drifted through the void like a predator searching for prey. Inside its armored hull, Commander Velkaris stood before a holographic display showing the blue-green planet below. Earth, the newest addition to the Galactic Coalition's ever-growing list of primitive worlds to be conquered. Such a small world, Velkaris mused, his forearms crossed behind his back. His reptilian features showed amusement as he studied the tactical data. Their technology is centuries behind ours. This will be easier than subduing the Arcturians. His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Thrax, stepped forward. The insectoid officer's compound eyes reflected the hologram's light. The humans have refused our demands for surrender. Commander. They seem unreasonably confident. Velkaris laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the command center. Let them be confident. Our plasma cannons can vaporize their cities from orbit. Our shields can withstand their primitive nuclear weapons. What could they possibly have that threatens us? Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the surface, announced the communications officer. Put it through. Velkaris ordered, expecting to hear pleas for mercy, or perhaps another futile attempt at negotiation. Instead, a human face appeared on the screen. The man wore simple camouflage clothing and had weathered features that spoke of years spent outdoors. He spoke in accented Galactic Standard, clearly using a translator. This is Sergeant Jake Morrison, United States Marine Corps. I'm authorized to speak on behalf of Earth's military forces. You boys, sure you want to do this? The bridge erupted in laughter. The sheer audacity of this primitive soldier questioning the might of the Korthax Empire was beyond amusing. Velkaris stepped closer to the screen, towering over the human's image even in holographic form. I am Commander Velkaris, of the Korthax Empire. Conqueror of 17 star systems. Your planet will be the 18th. Your weapons are toys compared to ours. The human didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled slightly. That so? Tell me, Commander, you ever hear of a little place called Vietnam? Afghanistan? Sometimes the fanciest toys don't mean much. Your historical references mean nothing to me, human. Our troops carry plasma rifles that can burn through your strongest armor. Our soldiers wear powered exoskeletons that make them immune to your projectile weapons. You still use chemical propellants. Velkaris spat the last words like they tasted bad. Jake nodded slowly. Yep, we sure do. Good old-fashioned gunpowder. Been using it for centuries. Got pretty good at it, too. This conversation bores me, Velkaris declared. Prepare the invasion force. We'll take their capital cities first. Then, hold up there, Commander, Jake interrupted. See, here's the thing. You're right that our rifles might seem primitive to you. But there's something you should know about humans and our primitive weapons. Despite himself, Velkaris found himself listening. There was something in the human's tone. A quiet confidence that seemed out of place given the circumstances. We've been killing each other with these primitive weapons for thousands of years, Jake continued. We've gotten real creative about it. Real. Precise. And some of us, he paused, adjusting something off-screen. Some of us can put a bullet through a target the size of your thumbnail from over a mile away. Sub-Commander Thrax chittered dismissively. Impossible. No species could achieve such accuracy with chemical projectile weapons. The variables alone, wind, gravity, atmospheric pressure, 2,122 meters, Jake said quietly. That's my personal record. Hit a hostile combatant in Afghanistan. Took me 3 seconds to calculate wind speed, elevation, humidity, and the Coriolis effect. One shot, one kill. The bridge fell silent. Even at that distance, the claim seemed absurd for a primitive projectile weapon. Velkaris recovered first. Even if your boast is true, what is one soldier against an army? We will deploy thousands of troops. Your marksmen will be overwhelmed in minutes. Maybe, Jake agreed. Or maybe not. See, Commander, you're thinking like a soldier from an advanced civilization. All about firepower and shields and technology. But humans? We're persistence hunters. We're patient. We're sneaky. And we really, really don't like being invaded. The transmission flickered, and suddenly Jake was standing, revealing a long rifle beside him. Even through the hologram, the weapon looked well-maintained, almost lovingly cared for. "This here is a Barrett M82 anti-materiel rifle," Jake said, patting the weapon. "50 caliber. Semi-automatic. Effective range of about 1,800 meters against personnel. Bit more against vehicles. Not fancy by your standards, I'm sure. But here's a question for you, Commander. Those shields of yours, they stop energy weapons, right?" "Of course," Valkyris snapped. "Our shields can disperse plasma bolts, laser fire, even directed energy weapons your species hasn't invented yet. How about kinetic energy?" The question hung in the air. Valkyris glanced at Thrax, who was hurriedly consulting his datapad. "Our shields primarily defend against energy-based attacks," Thrax admitted slowly. "Kinetic barriers require significant power allocation. Standard trooper shields focus on energy dispersion for efficiency." Jake's smile widened. "Thought so. Most advanced species we've met seem to forget about good old-fashioned bullets once they discover energy weapons. Rookie mistake." "It matters not," Valkyris snarled, his patience exhausted. "Even without shields, our armor is designed to dissipate energy, not stop penetration," Jake finished. "Yeah. We've been studying the salvage from your scout ships. Real impressive stuff. Lightweight, flexible, perfect for plasma dispersion, but a 50 cal armor-piercing round?" He shook his head. "That's going to punch through it like tissue paper." The human leaned closer to the camera. "Here's what's going to happen, Commander. You're going to land your troops, all confident in their fancy gear. They're going to march through our cities, expecting us to line up and fight fair. But we don't fight fair. We fight to win. Our threats from a doomed species," Valkyris spat, but something cold was settling in his stomach. "Not threats, Commander. Promises. You know what a sniper is? It's a hunter. A patient, calculating hunter who can wait hours, days even, for the perfect shot. And Earth has thousands of them. Trained military snipers who can thread a needle at 1,000 meters. Hunters who've been dropping deer at distance since they were kids. Competition shooters who do this for fun." Jake picked up his rifle, checking the scope with practiced movements. "Your troops will land, and they'll never see us coming. They'll be walking through a city, all confident in their superiority, and then pop. One of them drops. They'll look around, confused, trying to figure out where the shot came from. Pop. Another one down. They'll panic, try to find cover. But how do you take cover from something you can't see? Something that can reach out and touch you from so far away your fancy sensors can't even detect the shooter? We have aerial support, orbital bombardment. Sure. If you want to turn Earth into a glass parking lot," Jake interrupted. "But you want to conquer us, not destroy us. Otherwise, you'd have done it already. No. You'll have to come down here and fight us on our terms. In our cities, in our forests, in our mountains, and every step of the way, you'll be wondering if you're in someone's crosshairs." The sergeant set his rifle down and pulled out a small metal object. "This is a 50 caliber round. Weighs about 45 grams. Travels at about 900 meters per second. When it hits, it delivers about 15,000 joules of energy to the target. Your fancy armor might stop a pistol round, maybe even rifle rounds, but this was designed to punch through engine blocks." Valkyris found himself staring at the small piece of metal. Such a primitive thing, relying on chemical explosion rather than magnetic acceleration or plasma generation. "And yet, you're bluffing," he said finally. "No military force could coordinate such a defense. You'd need thousands of these specialists, positioned perfectly, supplied constantly." "Commander," Jake said softly, "America alone has over 300 million privately owned firearms. About 40% of our households have at least one gun. We have more guns than people, and a good chunk of those gun owners can hit a target at 300 meters without breaking a sweat. Some of us, like me, we can reach out a lot farther than that." He leaned back in his chair, casual now. "But hey, don't take my word for it. Come on down. Deploy your troops. See what happens when an advanced civilization forgets that sometimes the old ways are old because they work." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Valkyrie stared at the empty space where the human's image had been, his mind racing. Everything about their military doctrine assumed enemy forces would meet them with similar weapons: energy shields, plasma rifles, hover tanks. The entire galactic coalition had moved past kinetic weapons centuries ago, viewing them as relics of primitive civilizations. But what if that was exactly what made them dangerous? "Commander," Thrak said quietly, "perhaps we should reconsider our approach. If their claims about accuracy are even partially true, prepare the ground forces," Valkyrie commanded, cutting him off. "But modify the deployment, increase shield power allocation to kinetic barriers, and—" He paused, the words tasting like defeat. "Issue a warning about potential long-range kinetic attacks." As his officers hurried to carry out orders, Valkyrie returned his gaze to Earth. Such a small world, such primitive weapons, and yet, something in that human's eyes had been unsettling. Not fear or bravado, but the calm confidence of a predator who knew exactly how deadly he was. The first dropships launched an hour later, carrying 10,000 of the Empire's finest soldiers. They descended through Earth's atmosphere, in perfect formation, shields glowing as they cut through the air. The troops inside made final checks on their weapons, adjusted their armor, and prepared for what they assumed would be an easy conquest. None of them noticed the lone figure lying prone on a rooftop 2 kilometers from the designated landing zone. Jake Morrison peered through his scope, tracking the lead dropship's descent. Wind from the west at 12 kilometers per hour. Air pressure slightly above normal. Distance. He smiled. Well within range. He activated his radio. "Eagle's Nest. This is Overwatch 1. I have eyes on the prize." Passing the word weapons, free on touchdown. Across the city, hidden in buildings, water towers, and carefully concealed positions, dozens of other snipers acknowledged the call. Former military, police marksmen, competition shooters, and even a few talented hunters, all waiting patiently for their moment. Jake settled the rifle against his shoulder and took a deep breath, then let half of it out. His finger rested lightly on the trigger as he watched the dropship's landing struts extend. In a few moments, the ramp would lower, and alien soldiers would march out, expecting to face a primitive enemy. They were about to learn why humans had never abandoned the bullet. The dropship touched down with a rumble that shook the abandoned street. Steam hissed from its engines as the landing ramp began to lower. Inside, squad leader Korval checked his plasma rifle one last time and activated his personal shield. The kinetic barrier overlay showed ready status, drawing extra power as commanded. "Remember," he told his squad, "the humans use primitive kinetic weapons. Keep your barriers active and watch for—" The first shot took him center mass. The 50 caliber round, traveling at nearly 3 times the speed of sound, reached Korval before he even heard the rifle's report. His kinetic barrier flared, trying to dissipate the enormous energy, but it had been calibrated for smaller projectiles. The barrier held for a microsecond before collapsing, and the armor-piercing round punched through his chest plate like it wasn't even there. Korval looked down at the hole in his armor, confusion in his 4 eyes, before toppling backward into the dropship. "Sniper!" someone screamed. "Take Cove!" The second shot caught Trooper Varax in the head. The third dropped the communications specialist before he could call for support. Panic spread through the squad as they tried to understand what was happening. The shots were coming from so far away their sensors couldn't pinpoint the source, and their combat doctrine had no response for this kind of attack. They stumbled down the ramp, seeking cover behind abandoned vehicles and building corners. But the human sniper had chosen his position carefully. Every piece of potential cover had been mapped, every angle calculated. As aliens dove behind a ground car, A shot punched through the vehicle's body and found the trooper hiding behind it. "Where is he?" Sub-Leader Thek roared, spraying plasma fire randomly at distant buildings. "How can one primitive—" He never finished the sentence. Jake's fifth shot caught him in the throat, the massive round nearly decapitating him. The remaining squad members broke. Training and discipline shattered in the face of an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't fight, couldn't even understand. They ran for the dubious safety of the dropship, but Jake had anticipated that too. 2 more fell before they reached the ramp, and another dropped just inside the cargo bay. In less than 90 seconds, 9 of the Empire's finest soldiers lay dead or dying. The survivors huddled inside the dropship, afraid to even peek out. Across the city, similar scenes played out as more dropships landed. Sniper teams engaged from distances the aliens thought impossible, their primitive chemical-propelled bullets proving devastatingly effective against troops prepared for energy weapons. The Korthak's advance stalled before it even began, squads pinned down by an enemy they couldn't locate. Back on the battlecruiser, Commander Velkaris watched the tactical display in growing horror. Squad after squad reported heavy casualties from long-range kinetic fire. Requests for orbital strikes flooded the communication channels, but he couldn't glass the entire city, not without defeating the entire purpose of the invasion. "Deploy aerial support," he ordered desperately. "Have them locate and eliminate these snipers." But the humans had prepared for that too. As Korthak's fighters screamed through the sky, shoulder-fired missiles rose to meet them. More primitive technology, chemical rockets with heat-seeking warheads, but effective enough against aircraft forced to fly low for ground support. 3 fighters exploded in rapid succession before the others pulled back to safer altitudes, too high to effectively spot individual shooters. Jake watched through his scope as another dropship attempted to deploy troops in a park near his position. He'd displaced after his initial engagement, moving to a secondary position he'd prepared days earlier. Rule 1 of sniper operations: never stay in the same place too long. He settled his crosshairs on the squad leader emerging from the ship. Range: 1,700 meters. Wind had picked up slightly. He made a minute adjustment to his scope and squeezed the trigger. The alien officer spun and fell. His troops scattered, seeking cover among the park's trees and monuments. Jake smiled grimly. Trees wouldn't stop a 50 cal round. He worked the bolt, chambering another massive cartridge, and found his next target. By sunset, the Korthak's invasion force had managed to secure only a few city blocks at tremendous cost. Every advance was met with withering sniper fire from positions they couldn't locate. Attempts to use sensors to find the shooters failed. The humans were using no electronics, just skill and simple optics. Thermal imaging was useless when the shooters were so far away their heat signatures were lost in the urban background. Commander Velkaris stood before the tactical display, watching casualty reports stream in. Over 1,000 dead, hundreds more wounded, and they'd barely established a foothold. His glorious invasion had turned into a massacre. "Sir," Thrax reported quietly, "the ground commander is requesting permission to withdraw. He says his troops are refusing to leave cover. They're terrified, sir. They're terrified. They're terrified. Terrified." The word hung in the air like an accusation. The finest soldiers in the Empire, conquerors of worlds, reduced to cowering in whatever shelter they could find because humans had figured out how to throw small pieces of metal very, very accurately. "Order all ground forces to fortify their current positions," Velkaris commanded wearily. "No more advances until we find a solution to this threat." On Earth, Jake Morrison cleaned his rifle in the gathering darkness. Around him, the city was quiet, except for the distant hum of alien dropships holding position. He'd accounted for 13 confirmed kills and probably twice that many wounded. Not bad for a day's work. His radio crackled. "All stations, this is Eagle's Nest. Outstanding work today. Rest up and resupply. Tomorrow, we introduce them to night operations." Jake smiled. The aliens thought they knew war because they had advanced technology. But humans had been perfecting the art of killing for millennia. And sometimes, the old ways really were the best ways. He patted his rifle affectionately. That's right, girl. Tomorrow, we show them what happens when they mess with Earth. Above, the stars twinkled peacefully, indifferent to the drama below. And somewhere among those stars, Commander Velkaris stared at his tactical display, beginning to understand that perhaps, just perhaps, primitive didn't mean helpless. The invasion of Earth had begun. But it wasn't going according to plan. The darkness that fell over the city brought no relief to the Korthax forces. If anything, it made things worse. Squad leader Xerix pressed himself against the wall of what had been a shopping center, his 4 eyes struggling to pierce the darkness beyond the faint glow of emergency lights. His night vision systems painted the world in false colors, but they couldn't show him what he needed to see most, where the human snipers were hiding. Movement on thermal, Sector 7, whispered Trooper Kalth, his voice tight with fear. Xerix checked his own display. A heat signature. Possibly human. Approximately 300 meters away. Within plasma rifle range. Steady, he ordered. Could be a civilian, or a sniper, Kalth countered. They watched the signature move slowly across their screens. It paused near a window, and Xerix felt his heart's rate increase. Korthax had 2 hearts, which made the terror twice as intense. The figure seemed to be setting something up. Sir, should we? The muzzle flash was invisible to their thermal imaging, but the result wasn't. Trooper Mekvar, positioned on the opposite side of their defensive perimeter, suddenly jerked and fell. The crack of the rifle reached them a second later, followed by Mekvar's agonized screaming. Medic! Someone called, but their medical specialist was already dead, taken by a sniper 7 hours earlier. Xerix watched in horror as the heat signature they'd been tracking calmly packed up and disappeared into the building's interior. They'd been watching the sniper the entire time and hadn't even known it. The human had taken the shot using some kind of primitive optical scope that didn't emit any electronic signatures their sensors could detect. Eagle 2. This is Eagle 7. A voice crackled over, captured Korthax communication equipment. The humans had figured out their frequencies within hours, and now used them to taunt their victims. That's 14 confirmed. How's your night going? 16 here, another voice responded. These boys really don't understand light discipline, do they? That glowing armor makes them real easy to spot. Xerix looked down at his own armor, its faint energy signature suddenly feeling like a target painted on his chest. The armor systems needed power to function, creating a subtle glow that Korthax forces had never considered a liability. Why would they? In every previous conflict, enemy forces had similar technology. Battles were fought with sensors and energy weapons, not primitive scopes and chemical projectiles. A plasma bolt streaked across the square as one of his troopers fired at shadows. The bright beam lit up the night, revealing their position to any watching eyes. Seconds later, the trooper who'd fired collapsed, a hole the size of a fist through his torso. No one fires without my direct order, Xerix screamed into his comm. But panic was spreading through his forces like a virus. These soldiers had conquered worlds, faced down enemy armies, survived battles that had entered Imperial legend. None of that had prepared them for this, an enemy that killed from the shadows, invisible and untouchable. 2 miles away, Sarah Chen lay prone on the roof of an office building, her eye pressed to the scope of her Remington 700. The rifle wasn't as powerful as Jake's Barrett, but the 308 Winchester round was more than sufficient for the ranges she was working at. A former Army sniper turned competition shooter, she'd answered the call like thousands of others when the aliens landed. Eagle 7. This is Eagle 9, she whispered into her throat mic. I've got a cluster of them trying to set up some kind of equipment in the park. Looks like a sensor array. Roger that, 9. They've been trying to get those up all day. Take it out if you can. Sarah studied the aliens through her scope. 6 of them, working frantically to assemble what looked like a sophisticated detection system. She could see the fear in their movements, the way they kept glancing at the surrounding buildings. Good. Let them be afraid. She'd already mapped out her firing sequence. The technician first without him. They couldn't complete the setup. then the officer giving orders. After that, targets of opportunity. She had 10 rounds in the magazine and confidence in every one of them. The technician's head filled her scope. Range, 420 meters. Minimal wind. She controlled her breathing, feeling her heartbeat slow. Between beats, in that moment of perfect stillness, she squeezed the trigger. The technician dropped. Sarah worked the bolt smoothly, barely disturbing her sight picture. The officer was already moving, but not fast enough. Her second shot caught him center mass, spinning him around before he fell. Panic erupted among the survivors. 2 ran for cover behind the half-assembled equipment, insufficient protection against rifle rounds. Sarah's third and fourth shots dropped them both. The remaining 2 split up, running in opposite directions. She tracked the one heading for a building entrance, leading him slightly. The shot took him just as he reached the door. The last alien made it to cover, diving behind a concrete barrier that would actually stop bullets. 5 for 6, she reported. 1 made it to hard cover. Outstanding work. 9. Displaced to secondary position. Sarah was already moving, breaking down her rifle as she headed for the stairwell. Rule 2 of sniper operations. They always return to the same spot. Sure enough, as she reached the ground floor, she heard the whistle of incoming plasma fire striking the roof she'd just vacated. The aliens were learning, but slowly. Too slowly. In the Korthax command dropship, Field Commander Torvan studied the tactical displays with growing despair. Half his landing force was combat ineffective, either dead, wounded, or too terrified to leave cover. The humans had turned the entire city into a killing field, and his troops were the prey. "We need to adapt our tactics," his intelligence officer suggested. "Perhaps if we move only at night, using full stealth protocols." "They have thermal optics," Torvan interrupted. "Primitive ones, but effective enough. And even without them, these snipers seem to see in the dark like predators." It was true. The humans had an unsettling ability to operate in darkness. Evolution on a world with a single sun had given them excellent night vision once their eyes adapted. Combined with their patience and cunning, it made them lethal opponents when the lights went out. "What about gas attacks?" another officer suggested. "Chemical weapons to flush them from their positions? Prohibited by galactic convention," Torvan reminded him. "Besides, initial scans show they have protective equipment. Gas masks, they call them. Another primitive technology they've perfected through centuries of killing each other." The command center fell silent. Every solution they proposed had a counter. Heavy armor? The humans had rifles that could punch through vehicle plating. Shields? Kinetic barriers drained power too quickly to maintain constantly. Air support? Shoulder-fired missiles and anti-aircraft guns from the planet's various conflicts made low-altitude operations suicidal. "Sir," the communications officer spoke up, "we're receiving another transmission from the humans." Torvan gestured wearily. "Put it through." Jake Morrison's face appeared on the screen, looking remarkably relaxed for someone in the middle of an invasion. "Evening, Commander. Thought I'd check in. See how your first day went." "You know exactly how it went," Torvan snarled. "You hide like cowards, striking from the shadows. Where is your honor?" Jake's expression hardened. "Honor? You invaded our world. You threatened our families. You want to talk about honor? Every shot fired today was in defense of our home. That's all the honor we need." "Face us in open battle," Torvan demanded. "Fight like true warriors." "Why would we do that?" Jake asked, genuinely puzzled. "You've got shields, plasma weapons, armor, and numerical superiority. Fighting you on your terms would be stupid. So we fight on ours." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about honor or glory or any of that nonsense. This is about survival. And humans, we're really, really good at survival. We've been practicing for thousands of years. We could glass your cities from orbit," Torvan threatened. "Reduce your world to ash. Could you?" Jake asked. Sure, you've got the firepower. But that's not why you're here, is it? You want our resources, our world intact. You want slaves or subjects or whatever you call it. Can't have that if we're all dead and the planet's a radioactive wasteland. He was right, and they both knew it. The Korthax Empire expanded through conquest, not destruction. Dead worlds generated no wealth, no troops for further expansion, no glory for the Empire. Besides, Jake continued, you glass one city. We execute every prisoner we've taken. And trust me, after today, we've taken quite a few. Torvin's eyes widened. You dare threaten prisoners of war? Prisoners of war have rights under our Geneva Convention, Jake said coldly. But that's an agreement between human nations. You're not human. You're invaders. Different rules. It was a bluff, mostly. The humans had indeed taken prisoners, wounded Korthax soldiers captured when their positions were overrun by quick strike teams. They were being treated well, given medical care and food, but the aliens didn't know that. And the uncertainty was another weapon in the psychological warfare. Listen, Commander, Jake said, his tone becoming almost conversational. I'm going to give you some free advice. Pack up and leave. Go home. Tell your empire that Earth is more trouble than it's worth. Because this is just the beginning. We've been gentle so far. Gentle? Torvan couldn't hide his disbelief. You've killed over 1,000 of my soldiers. With small arms, Jake pointed out. Wait until we break out the heavy stuff. You know what a Raufoss round is? It's a 50 cal bullet with an explosive tip. Turns your fancy armor into shrapnel. Or maybe we'll dust off some of those anti-tank rifles from the last World War. 20mm rounds. Designed to punch through armor a lot thicker than what your boys are wearing. He paused, letting that sink in. And that's just the conventional stuff. Want to know what our special forces are planning? Navy SEALs? Delta Force? SAS? Spetsnaz? Those boys make regular snipers look friendly. They're already behind your lines, Commander. Watching. Waiting. Planning. As if on cue, an explosion rocked the command dropship. Not enough to breach the hull, but sufficient to shake everyone inside. Emergency alarms blared as systems reported damage to external sensors. What was that? Torvan demanded. Satchel charge, probably, Jake said casually. Amazing what a few pounds of C4 can do to sensitive equipment. Like I said, special forces. They're artists when it comes to breaking things. The transmission ended, leaving Torvan staring at a blank screen. Around him, his officers worked frantically to assess the damage. The explosion had destroyed several critical sensor arrays, effectively blinding them to large sections of the city. If human special forces could get that close to his command post, double the guard, he ordered. Full kinetic barriers at all times. And someone find out how they got past our perimeter. But he already knew the answer. The same way the snipers remained hidden. The same way they'd turned a routine invasion into a nightmare. The humans understood warfare in a way the Korthax, for all their advanced technology, did not. They understood patience, stealth, psychology. They understood that warfare wasn't just about weapons and shields, but about breaking the enemy's will to fight. And with every shot from an unseen rifle, every explosion in the night, every whispered taunt over captured radios, they were succeeding. Miles away, Jake Morrison settled into his new position for the night. He'd chosen an abandoned apartment building with good sight lines over a major intersection the aliens would have to cross if they tried to expand their perimeter. His rifle was loaded. His rangefinder showed clear readings to multiple points, and he had enough ammunition to make the night very long for any Korthax troops brave enough to venture out. All Eagles, this is Eagle 1, he said into his radio. Phase 2 begins at midnight. Remember, controlled shots only. Make every round count. We want them jumping at shadows by dawn. Acknowledgements came back from dozens of positions around the city. Former military snipers, police marksmen, hunters, competition shooters all united in defense of their world. The aliens had expected to face a primitive civilization, easily cowed by superior technology. Instead, they'd found a species that had turned killing into an art form. Jake peered through his scope at the Korthax positions. He could see them huddled behind their barricades, weapons pointing outward, sensors sweeping desperately for threats they couldn't locate. Every few minutes, one would move, trying to improve their position or respond to some false alarm. Those were the ones Jake was waiting for. Movement. A Korthax trooper, probably desperate to relieve himself, scrambled from cover toward what he thought was a safe corner of the building. Jake tracked him smoothly, calculating distance and wind automatically. The alien made it 3 steps before the bullet found him. 1 shot, 1 kill, the American way. As the night wore on, the pattern repeated across the city. Korthax forces, trained for stand-up fights with energy weapons and shields, found themselves in a nightmare of invisible death. Every shadow could hide a sniper. Every window could frame a rifle barrel. Every moment of exposed movement could be their last. By dawn, the invasion force had pulled back to a defensive perimeter, less than a mile across. Thousands of the Empire's finest soldiers, reduced to cowering in whatever cover they could find by an enemy they outnumbered, but couldn't see, couldn't fight, couldn't understand. Commander Torvin stood in his dropship, watching the sun rise over the human city. The light revealed the bodies of his soldiers scattered across the streets, testament to the terrible night they'd endured. Casualty reports showed over 2,000 dead, twice that many wounded. They'd been on the ground for less than 36 hours. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported quietly, "the troops are requesting permission to withdraw. Morale is critical." Critical. A polite way of saying his soldiers were on the verge of mutiny. These weren't conscripts or garrison troops, these were elite forces. The best the Empire had to offer, and they were being systematically destroyed by humans with rifles that belonged in a museum. "Not yet," Torvin said, though the words tasted like ash. "We'll try one more assault. Full combat power. Every soldier, every vehicle, all at once. We'll overwhelm their snipers through sheer numbers." It was desperation, and everyone knew it. But what else could he do? Retreat meant admitting defeat to a primitive species. The Empire would never forgive such humiliation. As his forces prepared for what would likely be their final assault, Torvin found himself thinking about the humans' words. They'd been practicing survival for thousands of years, practicing killing for just as long, and now, faced with invasion, they'd shown why those primitive rifles they clung to were more dangerous than any plasma cannon. Because it wasn't about the weapon. It was about the warrior who wielded it. And humans, these terrible, patient, invisible humans, were warriors in ways the galaxy had never imagined. The second day of the invasion was about to begin. And somewhere in the city, hidden in shadows and patience, thousands of rifle scopes were already tracking their targets. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ruined streets, as Field Commander Torvin prepared for what he knew would be his final gamble. Around him, the remnants of his invasion force checked weapons and adjusted armor with the mechanical movements of soldiers who had already accepted death. Their eyes, however many each species, had showed the hollow look of troops pushed beyond their breaking point. "All units report ready, sir," his tactical officer announced, though his voice lacked any enthusiasm. 3,000 combat-effective troops, 47 vehicles, and 6 remaining gunships. 3,000. He'd landed with 10,000 of the Empire's finest warriors just 36 hours ago. Now, 7,000 were dead, wounded, or too broken to fight, all because of humans and their primitive rifles. "Sir, we're detecting movement in the surrounding buildings," the sensor operator reported. "The humans are repositioning." Of course they were. Somewhere out there, Jake Morrison and his fellow snipers were preparing for the assault they knew was coming. Torvin could almost feel their crosshairs on him, waiting for the perfect moment. 5 miles away, Jake lay in his newest position, a water tower that gave him excellent fields of fire over the main avenue the aliens would have to use. His Barrett was freshly cleaned and loaded with armor-piercing incendiary rounds. API, the the military called them. They'd punch through armor and then explode, causing devastating secondary damage. "All Eagles, this is Eagle 1, he said into his radio. "Looks like they're going all in. Remember the plan vehicles first. Then officers. Make them pay for every meter." 1. Sarah Chen responded from her position in a department store. "Eagle 9 copies. I've got 3 javelins ready to go." The anti-tank missiles were another example of human weapons the aliens hadn't expected. Fire and forget technology that could destroy their armored vehicles from kilometers away. "Eagle 14 here," another voice added. "Managed to get my hands on a Lottie. Can't wait to see what 20mm does to their day." Jake smiled grimly. The L-39 Lottie was a Finnish anti-tank rifle from World War II, firing rounds the size of small artillery shells. Some gun collector had donated it to the cause, along with a cache of armor-piercing ammunition. Against modern human tanks, it would be useless. Against Korthak's armor designed primarily for energy dispersion, it would be devastating. "Movement," someone reported. "They're coming." Through his scope, Jake watched the Korthak's forces emerge from their defensive positions. They moved in a classic military formation. Vehicles in front, infantry behind, gunships providing overhead cover. It was textbook tactics for a conventional assault, which was exactly why it wouldn't work. The lead vehicle, a hovering personnel carrier, had made it exactly 100 meters when the first javelin struck. The missile, designed to defeat modern human tanks, tore through the alien vehicle's lighter armor like paper. The explosion sent debris flying, and Jake could see alien soldiers scrambling from the burning wreck. He centered his crosshairs on an officer by the look of his armor markings. Range: 1,400 meters. A long shot, but well within his capabilities. The API round left his barrel with a crack that echoed off the buildings. Through his scope, he watched the officer stagger as the round penetrated his armor, then fall as the incendiary component detonated inside. The battle erupted across the entire front. Snipers engaged from dozens of positions, picking off targets with methodical precision. Anti-tank weapons destroyed vehicles faster than the gunships could respond, and from somewhere to the north, the massive booms of the Lottie announced that Eagle 14 had joined the party. But the Korthaks kept coming. Torvan had committed everything to this assault, and sheer numbers began to tell. Alien soldiers gained ground meter by bloody meter, using the burning wrecks of their vehicles as cover. Plasma fire raked buildings, forcing snipers to displace or die. "Eagle 7 is down," someone reported. "Building got hit by gunship fire." Jake gritted his teeth and focused on his shooting. Another vehicle in his sights. He put an API round through its engine compartment, watching with satisfaction as it ground to a halt. Smoke pouring from its systems. The crew bailed out, only to be cut down by rifle fire from other positions. But the aliens were learning, adapting even in their desperation. Smoke grenades began to obscure the battlefield, making long-range shots difficult. Suppressive plasma fire, wild and inaccurate but constant, kept snipers' heads down. The advance continued. "They're getting close to the second defense line," Jake's radio crackled. "All Eagles, prepare to fall back to tertiary positions." Jake fired his last round, watching another alien soldier fall, then began breaking down his rifle. Time to move, but as he descended from the water tower, he could hear the sharp crack of rifles from the second line of defense. These weren't long-range snipers but regular civilians with hunting rifles, AR-15 seconds, and whatever else they could find. The aliens were about to learn another hard truth about humans: everyone was a potential combatant. In the streets below, squad leader Xerix led what remained of his unit through smoke and rubble. They'd advanced 800 meters at a cost he didn't want to calculate. Bodies of his soldiers littered the route behind them, each one taken by those damned invisible rifles. "Structure ahead," his point trooper reported. "Looks like a defensive position." Xerix peered through the smoke. A hastily erected barricade blocked the street, and he could see movement behind it. Finally, humans they could actually see and engage. "Prepare to assault, plasma fire on my mark." They charged forward, plasma rifles blazing. The barricade erupted in splinters and flames. For a moment, Xerix felt hope. This was the kind of fighting they understood. Then the return fire started. It wasn't the precise, deadly shots of the snipers. This was a wall of lead, hundreds of rounds per second from dozens of weapons. Xerix watched his troopers fall like wheat before a scythe. Their armor, compromised by constant kinetic barrier use, provided little protection against the sheer volume of fire. An elderly human male popped up from behind cover, leveling what looked like an ancient rifle. The bullet took Xerix in the shoulder, spinning him around. As he fell, he saw more humans emerging, men, women, some barely adults, all armed, all firing with grim determination. This wasn't a military defense. This was an entire population rising up against invasion. From his command post, Torvin watched his assault dissolve into chaos. The tactical display showed a nightmare of red icons. Units out of contact. Vehicles destroyed. Entire formations simply gone. The humans had turned their city into a meat grinder, and his forces were the meat. "Sir, the gunships are reporting critical fuel levels," his air commander said. "They need to return to the carrier for resupply." "Negative," Torvin ordered. "They stay until—" He never finished the sentence. A massive explosion rocked the command dropship as a Hellfire missile, fired from a drone so small the Korthax sensors had dismissed it as a bird, found its mark. The dropship's shields, configured for energy weapons, offered no protection against the shape-charge warhead. Torvin pulled himself from the wreckage, purple blood streaming from a gash in his head. His command staff lay dead or dying around him. Through the smoke, he could see human soldiers advancing, not snipers now, but regular infantry, moving with practiced precision. A figure emerged from the smoke, Jake Morrison, his Barrett slung over his shoulder, a shorter rifle in his hands. He approached Torvin carefully, weapon ready but not directly threatening. "Commander Torvin, I presume?" Jake said, his translator rendering the words clearly. "I'd say it's a pleasure. But we both know that'd be a lie." "Kill me then," Torvin snarled, struggling to his feet. "End this with honor." "Kill you?" Jake shook his head. "Why would I do that? You're worth way more alive. See, you're going to go back to your empire and tell them what happened here. Tell them that Earth might have primitive weapons, but we've got something your advanced civilization forgot." "And what's that?" Torvin asked, though he already knew the answer. "The will to use them," Jake said simply. "Every man, woman, and teenager old enough to hold a rifle. 7 billion of us, Commander. And every single one willing to fight for our home." The battle was effectively over. Across the city, the remaining Korthax forces were surrendering. Overwhelmed not just by snipers, but by an entire population that refused to be conquered. The Great Invasion had lasted less than 2 days. Back on the orbiting battlecruiser, Commander Velkaris received the reports with numb disbelief. His entire ground force, destroyed or captured. His modern military, defeated by primitives with chemical-propelled projectiles. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "Field Commander Torvin is signaling. The humans are allowing him to transmit." Velkaris gestured weakly. His subordinate's face appeared on the screen, battered and bloodied but alive. "Commander," Torvin said, his voice hollow, "the humans have terms." "Terms?" Velkaris laughed bitterly. "We're the ones with the orbital firepower. We could still—" "No, sir," Torvin interrupted. "We couldn't. They've made it clear any orbital bombardment will result in the immediate execution of all prisoners. And sir, they have thousands of our soldiers." The bridge fell silent. The threat was clear. The humans held all the cards now. "Their terms are simple," Torvin continued. "We leave. We mark Earth as a prohibited system in all star charts. And we never come back. The Empire will never agree to such humiliation," Velkaris protested. "A primitive world dictating terms to us?" Jake Morrison's face appeared beside Torvin's. "Commander Velkaris, let me make something real clear. This wasn't a victory for primitive weapons over advanced ones. This was a victory of warriors over soldiers. You fight because you're ordered to. We fight because this is our home. He leaned closer to the camera. Take your people and go. Tell your empire that Earth is off limits. Not because we're primitive, but because we're dangerous. We've been killing each other with these primitive weapons for thousands of years. Imagine what we'd do to protect our world from outsiders. The implied threat was clear. This was just one city, primarily defended by civilians with small arms. The humans had held back their actual military, their heavy weapons, their nuclear arsenal. If the Korthax wanted a real war, Earth could give them one, a war of mutual annihilation that would serve no one. Oh, and Commander, Jake added, you might want to spread the word to any other species thinking about invading. Earth knows you're out there now. We'll be watching the skies. And we'll be ready. The transmission ended. Velkaris stared at the empty screen for a long moment, then turned to his bridge crew. Prepare to retrieve our survivors. Set course for home once they're aboard. Sir? Thrax asked, confused. We're retreating? We're surviving, Velkaris corrected. There's no glory in fighting an enemy that can't be intimidated, can't be shocked into surrender, and views death as an acceptable price for victory. The humans, they're not like us. As the Korthax fleet prepared to leave, Jake Morrison stood on a rooftop watching the alien dropships lift off, carrying their defeated soldiers home. Around him, the city erupted in celebration. They'd done it. They'd faced down a technologically superior enemy, and won, through skill, determination, and the effective use of technology the aliens had dismissed as primitive. Sarah Chen joined him, her rifle slung over her shoulder. Think they'll be back? Jake shook his head. Not them. Maybe others. But word will spread. Earth isn't an easy target. We're the planet that weaponized patience and turned marksmanship into an art form. They watched the last dropship disappear into the sky, heading for the massive battlecruiser still visible in orbit. Soon, it too would be gone, carrying with it a message for the rest of the galaxy. Earth was not to be trifled with. What now? Sarah asked. Jake smiled. Now, we rebuild. We prepare. And we make sure that the next time someone looks at Earth and sees primitive weapons, they remember what those primitive weapons can do in the right hands. The invasion was over, but Earth's introduction to the galactic community had just begun, and somewhere in the Pentagon, military planners were already working on Project Reach, a program to train a new generation of snipers equipped with reverse-engineered alien technology. Because if there was one thing humans were good at, it was taking someone else's advantages and finding ways to counter them. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Technological superiority meant nothing in the face of human determination, ingenuity, and millennia of practice at the art of war. Earth stood ready, rifles in hand, watching the stars, and in the depths of space, as the Korthax fleet jumped to hyperspace, Commander Velkaris made his final log entry. Recommendation to Imperial Command. Designate Earth as a Class X prohibited system. Reason: indigenous population possesses abnormal combat effectiveness despite primitive technology. Any invasion attempt will result in unacceptable casualties. The humans have a saying that I now understand. God created men, but Samuel Colt made them equal. They have made themselves equal to any threat through skill and will alone. We would be fools to test them again. The stars returned to their peaceful twinkling, unaware that below them, a primitive world had just changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Not through advanced technology or superior firepower, but through the simple, deadly effectiveness of a human with a rifle and the will to use it. The age of human isolation was over. The age of respect for Earth had begun. And it had started with the crack of a sniper's rifle and the fall of an overconfident empire's ambitions. In the end, the most primitive weapon of all had proven the most effective. The human spirit, unbreakable and defiant, ready to face any threat, to protect what they loved. The galaxy would remember this lesson for a very long time.